This is probably as close of a race we've had for MVP in a while. I've made the case for both candidates. I've gone back and forth for the last month, really, deciding who I was going to go with. To me, if you think there's a clear choice, I just don't trust you. If you want to go with the other player that I didn't select, that's totally fine, because I think you can make a great case for both candidates, but both are really deserving candidates. There's not a clear winner. Having said all that, I do have to pick one player. It was close, but in the end, I'm going to go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as my MVP this year. That doesn't discount the historically great season Jokic had, especially on the offensive end. But when you're up against another player who had, I think, a historically great season for a guard, the numbers that SGA put up, especially at his efficiency, it's really hard to go one way or the other. And so when we're splitting hairs trying to decide, the fact that SGA led his team to such a historically great season, winning 68 games, blowing teams out, yes, you could say that the Thunder have a better team top to bottom, but this Thunder team without SGA wouldn't be that great of a team. Yes, they might still make the playoffs. The Nuggets, you could argue, wouldn't make the playoffs without Jokic. But I think where SGA catapults them to is just as big as where Jokic catapults the Nuggets. And I think most importantly, when I look back at this regular season, I'm going to think of this Thunder team. I'm going to think about how great they were and how they were led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Again, Jokic has been great. He averaged a triple-double for the first time in his career. He had an historically great season. I do think he slipped a little bit on the defensive end. I think we've had better Jokic defensive seasons than we had this year. Sometimes I think the difference between SGA and Jokic on the defensive end maybe is overvalued. I think Jokic is typically an underrated defender. SGA might be slightly overrated as a defender, but I think this year that gap was a little bit larger. So again, when we're splitting hairs, I'm leaning SGA in that regard as well. I do think it's different if I'm picking a player to start a franchise with. If that was the exercise, I'm still picking Jokic. I still think Jokic is the best player. If I had to pick a player for this postseason, I would pick Jokic, but that's not the question. We are talking about an MVP for this regular season only. And we've gone through this before with obviously guys like LeBron, who was the best player for 10, 15 plus years, but he didn't win MVP every year. And you could argue maybe he should have won a couple more, but there were a lot of times where the right player won MVP, and I think that's the case again this year. Jokic is still the best player. He still has that belt. But to me, if we're talking MVP for this regular season, it's going to SGA. And it's a close race, but I think that's the right choice.